Hey guys, I'm back. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I've got the day off today, so let's do some crafting. So some updates from what I was working on last Wednesday. Working on the whole Bob helmet thing. The whole acrylic thing I was working on was not really working out so well. The glue kind of smeared and had to start over again. So I'm gonna wait till I get a chance to run to the plastic store, get some more materials. I'm gonna try a different update on that. So maybe more on that later. Today I wanted to do something different. That other project was like well underway. I want to start from complete scratch. Um, I'm working. I have an idea for Katsucon. Um, my friend Bag and Cats and I are doing a Konosuba gender bend. So the idea there is I'm going to do Darkness and he's going to do Megumin. Maybe we can get a few other people, but it might just be the two of us. The reason why I was excited about doing Darkness is Darkness has a full-on armor, and it's a pretty simple, basic armor. And I've never actually done a full armor build before, so this is going to be me kind of going in blind, seeing if like the techniques I've used before might actually translate to this. Also, gender bend's kind of fun because you get to put a little bit of a spin on it. You get it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. You're just trying to really represent the character. So I'm gonna switch over here to some like reference images that I've been working with. So this is Darkness. I just Google image search, just trying to get a lot of different angles. Sometimes fan art can be interesting. I like this because they did their own spin on it. You can see that there's a little bit of additional details that I may or may not choose. Like, oh, I might borrow from that, or like, just kind of helps you think outside of, the anime model. So I actually like this one in particular. Wish I knew the artist's name, but it was like one of the image search that I found was clearly ripping it off from somewhere else. Very important to attribute artist. If you see anything on my stream that is yours, please let me know. I'll gladly give you all the credit in the world because I love supporting artists. We're all in the same boat, right? I wish I was that talented. Anyway, so this is what I'm going to start with. This is probably the simplest piece. It's a basic piece of shoulder armor. Nothing too crazy. Then I'm going to move on to this feathered piece, which is a lot more interesting. I'm a little scared to make that one, but also excited. So we're going to build this right now. Again, I've got all these different angles. The other thing I started to do is like, okay, when you're doing a gender bend, really what you're trying to do is kind of just change the silhouette a bit. I think you're playing a video game and you got like a male-female slider. It's the same outfit, but it just sort of like adjusts a little bit. And I think for me, especially with an armor build, I'm a very big dude. I do not have a Dustinus La Latina's curvy body. So I think my goal is I'm actually going to try to go a little bit more heavy in the shoulder, something that's more like traditional Crusader Paladin. So I did some more image searches, and this one I was able to credit. This guy did this really cool Crusader artwork that I thought was really interesting because it both had kind of like a fuzzy, feathery side and a very kind of structured shoulder on the other side. I think this is like some Pathfinder art, which I thought was interesting because I don't have boobs, at least not those sort of boobs. But what was interesting is that she has this kind of diagonal shape here. And this is really kind of like a good solid cleavagey sort of area that I really don't want to emphasize. I'd rather have, more of a broader flat build up here. So what I loved about this is that this sort of had a mirrored version here. So I'm not going to kind of ignore the rest of this. This is more like, this is an interesting way of translating sort of a busty chest plate into sort of a male busty chest plate. So I think one of the major changes I'm going to make with this outfit is instead of having sort of the diamond up here in kind of a cleavage area, I'm going to sort of extend it down. So I'm going to be able to flatten this out, but I'm still going to like, translate, because this is like, these ribbons are such like a defining part of who she is and her character, that I'm sort of excited to sort of pull that in. So these are really here just to kind of remind myself that this is not the silhouette I'm working on. These are here to sort of show me like, hey, how you see this two side by side, and hopefully it'll help out. Also in terms of like figuring out proportion, because this is a really tiny shoulder pad. I'd love to get it really big, right? So this is just basically telling me like, hey, this, instead of being at my neck level, might be closer to my ear level, is really what this is going to help me out with. So that's that. I'm going to come back to my scene here. The other way, actually, before we talk about this, let's talk about the materials I'm going to use. Everything I'm using today is super basic. I use for almost everything every time I'm patterned. It's not, some people are really complex. They buy patterns, which is great. Buying patterns is a great way to start out. It also supports other crafters who, you know, are out trying to get some supplemental income. And I often recommend what's his name? Evil Ted has some good free patterns. Also has ones that you can buy. I bought a few myself. But that's a great way to learn some basic like foam crafting, but you really don't need them. And because to actually create a pattern, it can be really intimidating. You can go into Illustrator and try to design the hell out of it, but really what you need is some good old-fashioned Reynolds wrap. Reynolds wrap and duct tape are just complete magical ways of being able to pattern anything. Moving on from that, you know, having some cardstock is helpful once you get the form with your Reynolds wrap. Moving to some cardstock. You know, you're going to need your rulers. You're going to need an X-Acto blade, which I can't find mine, so I'm going to be using a bit of a bigger blade today. I prefer this over scissors. You can use scissors too. But that and like a Sharpie is really all we're going to use until we move on to the Eva foam side. The next part is going to be helpful if you have a friend, but I'm crafting by myself today, and about almost a year ago, actually, I made this thing. This is you do not need this, and I stress that because I made this thing like, I'm going to use this all the time. I've never used it. It's been taking up precious space in my closet. So for today, I think like, okay, maybe I might try using this since I'm on my own today. But we'll see how quickly I stop using it. So this right here is I'm going to switch, is a plaster cast of my torso. There's some really cool tutorials on how to do this. You basically buy this fairly inexpensive box of plaster casting material, and you just, you know, slather yourself up in like an exercise shirt and Vaseline, and you do the front side and the back side, and then you wind up saming them together. It's kind of a fun process, completely unnecessary. You can also just have a friend help out pattern. You can do torso cast of your head too. I wound up doing it with aluminum foil instead. It was actually easier. Basically, the general concept of what we're doing, and then this is probably way more art than science, is you basically just start attaching some aluminum foil to what you're trying to make a pattern around. So I'm actually doing something, this might be a really unnecessary step, but I want to kind of move to my table as quickly as possible. So I'm actually going to just kind of start out by making a pattern for my cast here. Again, it's a cast of a cast. Completely unnecessary, but I just want to kind of isolate a bit of a shoulder area and maybe minimize it down to kind of where the silhouette's going to land. And I'm also doing this because I have no idea how I'm actually going to build this, and this is probably like a good way to just kind of kickstart the process. So really all you do again is you just start layering down at least one layer of Reynolds wrap, and then you just start taping it down. It's that simple. Once you get the shape that you want, you then can just take it off and start drawing on it with a Sharpie and then cut it out. And when it lays flat, you'll get all the shapes you need to be able to cut your Eva foam. So we're just going to do this real quick. And there's really no art to it. You don't have to like go a certain direction or have a certain number of layers. It's just the goal here is to be quick and fast. This definitely does not need to be perfect. I've done this a lot with like my face, like when I was doing my Wolfram mask. It was me standing in front of a mirror and just pressing aluminum foil into my face and then taping it down. And I became a huge fan of this process because I thought like this is never going to work. But the reality was, at the end, I got these really interesting pieces that just curved around my nose, and I glued them together, and it made just the perfect nose shape. And I was just like, okay, wow, this is pretty fantastic. Like a lot of people will be like molding and sculpting like Warbler. It's not necessary. So I'm just gonna keep going around here. I'm probably gonna after this, I'm gonna first then start thinking about how I'm actually maybe gonna create a curve here, because I may need to add more. I may be able to cut some off. I'm gonna use this to kind of just create a shoulder base, because I think ultimately darkness is it's gonna be more of a lofted shape like this, more of a geometrical lofted shape. I just want to give sort of a smaller thing to sort of work off of, because this cast doesn't really work really well with like pinning and the whatnot. So basically, I mean, if it's not obvious, basically what's happening here is the aluminum foil is kind of your thing that's creating the shape, and the tape is just kind of locking that shape in. This is actually a really cool practice. Like you could do, I took a bag, put it over my head, not covering my mouth so I could still breathe. You do need to go in that detail, like you can add some like straws or something to your nose, but I don't recommend it. That's frightening. But I did that, and I over my head, wrapped duct tape around it, and then stuffed that with some upholstery foam. And that's one of my I use that when I need to kind of pattern on the size of my head, or it also makes a really easy homemade wig stand. And those are really cool because you could just shove T-pins straight through them. They're really useful. I've actually been thinking about just making a whole bunch of them just to, display masks and stuff. Okay, I'm almost done here. I'm going to go back to my sketch, and I'm going to start drawing on top of this. So, you can. I'll show you already. Like this is, well, I curved under for some reason. See already, I can pull this off, and those complex curves. I'll show here. Yeah, those complex curves kind of get locked in, right? And it's that subtle things that this is capturing. This still bends. It's not perfect, but if you imagine this translating to EVA foam, this is kind of locking in this subtle shape. And when you start trying to make your pattern, it's figuring out where to cut, where to put those lines in to lay it flat, and to strategize around, because those lines are usually visible, like how to hide them. You might make like 5 of these and experiment with different ways to sort of cut it so that it lays flat, and then you can control how your pattern's going to lay out. So I'm going to sort of see if this is enough. I'm going to go back to my webcam. I'm going to go look at my reference. So looking at it, actually I'll let you see my screen. Looking at it, I'm going to want to make it kind of go from kind of my collarbone down to kind of the middle of my tricep. It's kind of what I want for this. Actually, no, I'm not going to ignore that. It's probably lower of my delt here, just to kind of get it to this scale. Although it looks like hers does kind of go down. I'm going to go middle of tricep. So that's going to be fun because I don't have full arm here. So in this case, I may actually wind up wanting to kind of move from here to myself, actually. This is the right size, yeah. So you can see, hey, look, I got a pattern that sort of fits to me, but I'm going to want to see how far does this go. This does go to my mid-tricep, so I'm going to be able to use the material I have. But I did say it also sort of starts kind of at my collarbone, which is roughly right here. So I may have a little extra. So again, this process is not, like I said, it's not a science. It's more of a guess and check and iterate. So what I'm going to actually do right now is take advantage of where I'm at right now. I'm going to just mark where I want this to land. So I said, oh, it looks like collarbone. This is my collarbone. I'm just going to mark a little mark on my collarbone. And I said mid tricep, roughly down here. Best thing about this is that you make adjustments to this throughout the process. So you don't have to spend a lot of time just measuring, rechecking. Just put it in. It's just aluminum foil and duct tape. It's really easy. And if you mess up, this is actually kind of funny. The easiest way to erase something is add more duct tape. Just cover up. You mess it up, add more duct tape, redraw the line. If that's wrong, cover it up in duct tape and redraw the line. So coming back to my scene, I'm going to now make some updates to this. So I want to extend this down to, I want to add a little bit more duct tape. And in this case, it's like I'm not pressing up against anything. So now I basically molded it in the tinfoil, and then I'm kind of holding it into place with this. Like I'm not pressing down on it. And then the other thing, this was go back. Sorry, I'm trying to duck my camera so you're not like getting like this really awkward close up of my face. I'm just gonna kind of try to trace the shape of this. So actually, it's a little bit less. It actually looks. I'm looking at it again, and it actually looks more like it's curving around my delt. But no, I'm making the larger version, so I'm gonna just go with that. All right, so I'm gonna sort of trace how I think this might actually play out in reality. So there's going to be a portion here. It's going to loft up from here. It's going to land here. It's going to come down from here to probably the base of my shoulders. This is actually, I don't necessarily know if it's going to work, but sometimes it's just like draw it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to redraw it to here. And then from here, it should wrap around to that point I had earlier. Okay. So looks like this is where I'm going to like loft up. This is going to, how curvy is it? So it's interesting. So on Valentinas, it kind of has, it's a little bit curved. This down, flip this over. I'm going to switch Sharpies. I think this one's running out. And then I always forget about the backside. I kind of go here. See if this, I feel like this has gone far enough back. Here to here. Mark this. And those I'm kind of supposed to be mirroring. Maybe one of the things where I'm a big fan of like if you can't decide, just do the first thing that comes to your mind and change it later. I'm just gonna kind of just connect the dots here. Try to roughly make it even. And let's just kind of see what happens. This is not super center. I'm going to kind of go here, and I'm going to see. That's one nice thing about this torso is I can actually see it on myself. So I'm going to move this over a little bit. Maybe even draw kind of what I think should be the center line. Maybe pull this in just a little bit. So this is definitely not going to be perfect, but we're going to see what happens. So this is, you can see what I'm showing you. So this is where I netted out. I just kind of just made some marks on this to start to see where this is fitted. And then I'm just going to hop in Grab my scissors. Just cut it out and see what happens, right? My scissors got some gunk on them. I think I pulled this out, actually, one of the smaller one. We've got a shoulder shape. So then this is going to be me. So normally, if you were actually going to be doing like a straight just shoulder pattern that was like molded to your body, you would just attempt to flatten this out, and you sort of plan some cuts just to allow it to go completely flat, and then you're going to be done with your pattern. But me, I'm kind of making kind of a base, because I'm basically trying to measure out the contour line of the base of it, so I've got a lot more work to do. So, just gonna also kind of just always look at it on myself. Starts to feel, it's not too big, not too small. So I did say I wanted it to start here, it ends here. Cool. So, how does this feel in relationship to the size of my head? It's a good sized ball. It's bigger than La Latina's. I don't think it's going to be quite as big as that reference shot, but we'll see what happens once we start lofting it. So I'm going to start sticking to this now. I'm going to use the torso cast just to kind of, if I need it, but for now I'm going to try to work straight in front of me. Just give me 1 second. So next up, so here we're gonna just start kind of trying to shape this. I should have set up like a split scene or something so you could see this in my Photoshop. Actually, here we'll do this wonderful thing. We'll let you kind of see my laptop screen as I'm looking at Photoshop, and hopefully you'll just be able to see what I'm doing. So the next step I'm going to do is I just really need to kind of start molding this shape. There's a few different methods I've used. It's so much easier to do like video game characters when you can just pull up the 3D model and rotate it. Like I'll show you when I was working on Bob, I just went into like the hero gallery and was able to just kind of, get several angled shots, and I literally will trace off of my monitor if I know it's the right angle. I don't know if I'm fully going to have this luxury here. The closest one I have is this. And what I'll also do, and this is really basic, but I don't have a printer. I don't really, and I don't really work digitally. I love working more like in the real world. So the most I'll usually do is just try to get this roughly to size. Since I'm streaming, I'm like working with my laptop in a smaller area. It's usually easier with a bigger monitor, so we'll see if this will even work to scale, maybe. So this is gonna really kind of neat. This is probably not gonna work. But sometimes what I will do is I will literally, yeah, it's not even gonna let me zoom in that much. I'll get the image on screen to be roughly the size in reality, and I'll usually like take some wax paper or some cardstock and actually cover it and actually trace over it, so I have like a reference. I don't think that's gonna work here, so I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it, which, what's the worst thing that could happen? I'm going to put you here. So I want to make sure that I can see y'all. So the next step is I need to start creating some three-dimensionality to it. So looking at the model here, this edge looks like it's going to probably lay flat. So it's going to, this piece, as it comes around my delt, so roughly this is kind of, just to kind of trace this curve. I'm going to kind of trace this delt out a little bit. And it looks like this is actually going to serve more as the plate, but seeing how I did this, this looks like I'm probably going to want a bit more here. So I just need to decide whether is this the scale of it. So I'm gonna start this here, and I might wind up extending this out a bit because just looking at this, this is gonna be using this material, and then from here I'm gonna loft up. So I'm gonna try to go back to here now that I know this. And I'm going to try to trace this shape on. This is going to actually be interesting. This comes in, and it kind of lands a little bit more flat. But sort of lands on the delt here. Comes down to this point. I went too far. So I just drew a lot of lines here, and most of them are wrong. And so I don't mess it up later. This is, I mentioned this earlier, I love doing this. I don't know why this excites me so much, but I love erasing with tape. So yeah, it's like, okay, so which is the right line? This is the wrong one. That line's now gone. So this is going to probably serve as another line to erase. I usually make the mistake of like, I'll just remember the correct line. I never remember the correct line. So, like I said, this piece along here is going to be this piece once I extend it out and sort of flatten it out. And now we're going to work on lofting this corner. So let's continue to check that contour of where we think this is going to work at. You can tell I'm in a studio apartment. I'm at my dining room table right now. So apologies. At least I made my bed today. The secret reason why I'm streaming is it forces me to actually keep my apartment somewhat put together instead of a crafting nightmare. So from here, next up, I want to sort of get the other pieces that I'm going to loft. So she does have a bit of a trim here, and I've been debating whether I want the trim to be on kind of a different plane or not. And I'm looking at the image; it does look like it does sort of shift out. So maybe I'm going to actually kind of, just for science, see what happens if I start to kind of trace this out more. So we got, this is the inside, and it looks like it's more halfway through. So so because I'm sizing it up, normally it rotates all alongside the delt, so you actually get the actual shape. It looks like it's kind of getting, if I'm going to make it larger than life, this is the area where it's going to get kind of confusing, is that I am going to need to start ignoring my body and start creating like the invisible, pretend anime muscle man that would be underneath. So I'm just going to kind of go, I'm going to mark roughly, normally I would measure, but for this case, I'm just going to kind of roughly measure about an inch out. There. I'm on a stream, I should do this the right way. If you do want to very quickly measure sort of like, these are usually like seam allowances or sort of an inch in, this is a really awesome tool. It's used in sewing a lot. You just sort of set this at the length you want, and you can just kind of run through and quickly mark it up. So I'm going to just kind of check my... Another cool thing to use, which I use a lot, if it's not more three-dimensional, having a transparent ruler like this is also really great because you can just hover over it and you can sort of see the length that you're at. So in this case, I would just align it to this line and I can do the same thing. This is kind of a, this tool is also great for drawing circles. So there's no real reason for science here because like being perfect, but trying to like share as much wisdom as possible on this because like I said, I'm fairly new at this and I kind of, so I sort of have fresh into mind sort of the things that I think are probably later on will be pretty obvious to me that were kind of like aha moments while I was learning. I actually started out learning how to do this stuff by trying to learn how to sew. And, you know, Evafoam and sewing are so similar in that it's a whole lot of pattern making. And so getting good at being able to just sort of create complex shapes and then translating them to a flat shape kind of goes a long way. So now I have kind of the sort of the shape on the inside. This is actually looking a little smaller than I wanted, but maybe I'll just finish this out and then I'll do a trick to kind of scale it up. I generally wind up having to do that anyway because the other thing I didn't mention earlier, which is actually pretty important, is if I wind up using a thick Evafoam, it's going to be like a ½ inch out, which means this needs to be kind of scaled to be about a ½ inch larger. Generally, I knew I was going to make this piece bigger anyway, so I wasn't so worried about that. But if you're doing like something tight fitting, you want to find either have a base that's already kind of thicker, or, and I'll probably wind up showing this later, find a way to scale this up, which basically kind of involves taking a picture of it perfectly flat, making some adjustments, scaling it up the amount that you want it to be, and then either tracing it out or printing it out, something like that. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully the pieces are small enough for me to do it here. All right, so I'm going to continue in. I want to mark kind of the halfway point, or the visible halfway point. I want this to kind of come from here, to sort of loft around. So again, thinking in 3 dimensions is tough sometimes, so it's going to like loft around from here back to here. So if that was in 3D space, that's going to wind up here. And I said I wanted to build this almost to like halfway to my ear. That might be more like here. So this may or may not work. But I'm gonna, let's see how this goes. So I'm gonna kind of draw that halfway point. And so this is going to be from here, and we'll kind of curve down here, and this will curve down to here. Does that kind of give me the shape I want? It's going to go to here. It's going to curve up to here. It's going to curve up to here, yeah. So the thing that I'm missing that's making this look weird, I think, is that I don't have this curve and I don't have this pulled out. But I think this is roughly the shape that I want. So I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually go ahead and I'm going to extend this out. So I'll show you how to do that. One second. Right here. So I'm going to grab some more of our friend, the Mr. Reynolds grab. And nothing too crazy here. I'm just going to kind of take this off, add it back on. And again, if you don't have a torso, this can always be something you do with your friend or something that you just, you know, do a lot of yoga stretches and try to do yourself. Just kind of set this on. Put this back. Just start doing some taping. I want to keep some of my lines, so I'm going to kind of do it kind of outward at first. just so I don't lose that. Put like a little bit so I can redraw the line. So it sort of moves out of place. It's always good to kind of, again, that sort of complex curve reference point, I keep using the shoulder as kind of like the reset point. Ideally, this would be like a form that you could actually shove a T-pin in. And that's actually why I have the duct tape on this, is that if it was really problematic, I would add a bunch of duct tape to this and use that to pin it in so it doesn't move, but I think this is mostly holding in place for me. So on, and just let's add a bunch more duct tape. And I just love this technique because it seems like every time I've seen it present, it's like, oh yeah, just do this, and you don't realize like how empowering this is because you can literally make anything. Because like, you know, a lot of times you have challenges. You're like, oh, I'm trying to make this 3D. How do I get the pattern? How do I do it? How do I translate something 3D into 2 dimensions? And this lets you almost kind of model it in air. And yeah, it's such a good feeling when it actually works out, and you actually then see the EVA foam piece. And again, usually it's like it's not so perfect. Like the first pass is probably not right. Actually, I think I've got all my scrap and random sort of like arms width kind of nearby. Like this was like my first Bob test piece that I just kind of threw out, but this was made from a single piece. It was my first pattern test, and this was, you know, molded from my face. And at one point in time, this was all just, you know, aluminum foil that when I did it, I figured out like, oh, I'm just going to make my seam cut here to match the pattern that of the seam actually in the model. And I was like, well, and I just hope that if I do that, and this is covered by a hat, so maybe I'll just do the seam in the back. Here, these seams aren't visible, so I can hide them. But hopefully I can then use this. And I was like, will this lay flat? It laid totally flat, which was great. And then when I re-glued it, it went back to the shape. If I would have used a pre-made helmet pattern, it would not have had the seams here. It would not have been the right shape. So that's what's so cool about this. So I digress. Let's get back to work. Trying to like keep some of my lines in, so I don't have to redraw so many. Let's see if I've extended this enough. I need to probably just go kind of flat. I probably need to go buy more tape. I go through so much of this stuff. Start to kind of. I actually need to. Actually try penning it. Look at that. So yeah, I'm gonna try what I said I was gonna do earlier. I'm going to put a little extra tape on here. What I found with my cast is that some points are soft and some are hard, so it's kind of like trying to get lucky with it. Um, the duct tape helps a lot. And because it's a T-pan, I can't... Normally I'd go like straight in, but I'm just going to kind of go at an angle. I'm just basically pinning it into the duct tape that I have set, and that's going to at least hold it, prevent it from like sliding down like that as I add weight here. The thing I like about this technique, and I was talking about this I think in one of my other streams, like, there's no like, you get this idea like some people are good at this and some people are bad, or like, you know, that some people are designers and some people aren't. Like, this is aluminum foil and duct tape. This is probably the lowest barrier for entry of anything you can imagine. So, and like people like me, I'm not like, I can't draw worth crap. I'm not really good at like perfectly mimicking things, but you can sort of do your best shot and then try a new version, then try a new version. Just keep updating it until it kind of gets close. You just gotta, it's more about being able to sort of see it and just observe it than get it right the first time. This way's not necessarily the cheapest or the fastest, but it's what works for me. Well, I mean, it's cheap in terms of duct tape's not the most expensive stuff in the world, but when it comes to making multiple versions of actual like builds, that's not, that can be painful sometimes on the checkbook. Okay, so I'm going to make some updates here because now I want to see this. So I talked about this line here. I don't know why I traced this edge here because this is going to then come. I said mid. Let's see it on me. No, I have it penned. I'm going to yellow it. So this is roughly about the same length from here to here. So I'm going to just kind of see what happens. This is going to kind of come. I keep going back and forth how precious I want to be. Like, oh, you should get it right, or whether I should just like draw it and see what it looks like. I think you'll probably find like everybody's kind of different. So it looks like this is kind of good here. Extend straight line. Actually looking kind of interesting. Let's see if the side angle. Assuming this is up here. Curve down. It's be a little long, but better long than short. Yeah, I'm actually gonna pull it down just a little bit. Again, I keep going back and forth. Like, I want to make these huge, but at the same time, I also don't want to look ridiculous. So, pull this down. This far. And there, you'll come across a lot of points where it's like, oh, the back, this curve doesn't match that curve or whatever. A lot of that finessing I do when I move into cardstock. That's when you can really try to clean up the curves and get it to be a little bit more machined. This is more about getting the general three-dimensional shape. There's just better times to sort of finesse that. So I'm going to cut off my excess, see where we're at now. I have like a lot of excess aluminum foil because of that extension, but it's okay. I didn't want to cut this off. Okay. Think we're using tape. Yeah, it's like this method is so malleable and it's just so easy and it's so foolproof. Erase. So this is what threw me off, is I drew this extra line in, and so I started cutting here. I said, erase your lines, it's important. And then I also like the whole process of erasing lines also just slowly makes this a lot thicker. So that's why I don't bother putting a whole lot of layers on over time, because I know how I am. I'm gonna wind up adding a lot of layers on as I go. So. Let's see where we're at. How we're doing. Okay. Our piece coming out. Got this. Now we can start thinking how we're gonna kind of start lofting this up. So let's see. How do we wanna? We can probably start from here, or do both at the same time. I don't know. Let's try both. Check on my. Give me 1 second. Model up again. I'm trying to think. This. Okay. Let's go back and see. I think I might take this off the model for a little bit, just because I like working in front of me. We'll come back to my workspace. We're gonna still be doing kind of the same thing. So what I'm actually gonna do, since I'm taking it off the form, and it's gonna be really easy for this to start to kind of flatten out, but I still want it to retain the shape. You could do this more formally with like some upholstery foam. And upholstery foam's not cheap. If you ever find an opportunity where you can salvage some from like a cheap sofa or something like that, or grab it, because it's insanely useful for cosplay. But it could be like $40 to $60 for like a roll of it. I bought like one huge roll that has lasted me half a year at least. But it's really good for filling in forms. Something like this, it's kind of unnecessary. But if you ever need like a lightweight filler, upholstery foam is awesome. Today I'm just going to use some bags, just because I kind of want it to maintain its form and shape a little bit. So I'm gonna just kind of go from here, get it to the roughly right angle, just kind of pull it in, just kind of stuff it a bit. Actually going to try to think how to. I don't want to make it too rigid. I've not actually done this before. So I was like, oh, let's use bags this time. Most of the time that I fill stuff to kind of retain shape, it's usually a full dome. So this may actually be a bad idea. Let's figure it out. Let's see what happens. It'd be a smarter idea just to stay working on the form. I just really don't want to. Just kind of get it kind of roughly. Yeah, sure. This is like, again, this is like kind of a good enough moment. So I'm going to go back just do what I was just doing, but now trying to work off of this form to start creating a new shape. And ultimately, I know that where this, three-dimensional seam is going to be is, and this is ultimately, if you look at the model up in here a little bit, this is going to wind up being just kind of a big triangle. Actually, how I think this is going to be. I'll do some quick sketching here. This is going to wind up looking like some sort of triangle with kind of a seam in the middle. This other piece is going to be more of a sort of weird rectangular shape, and this one is going to be one as well. Then the aligning will probably be something that I just wrap around. Maybe, we'll see. I might actually make another form. Maybe this will be a form that I make on the bottom that this sits on top of. They always say, the advice I was given when I looked around, that you should always decide how you're going to attach the shoulder before you make it. I'm not heeding that advice. I have no idea how I'm going to attach it because I want to get the armor piece built first. I might be able to attach to it. I might not. So I don't always do what I'm told. So, but I think this is kind of roughly the shapes we're going to go in. So we're going to probably try to create this form in 3D on top. So get out our Reynolds wrap, see what happens. So the reason why I sketch this out is because I'm going to kind of start with roughly the shape that I think it should be. So if I'm making this kind of diamond-like shape, starting with kind of a pseudo diamond, just kind of helps your brain from going through loops, trying to figure out what the hell you're trying to think. Because again, thinking in 3 dimensions is not the easiest thing in the world. So, model away, pull this in. So we're basically looking to create something that kind of lines up with this edge and stands up. I went way too far with this edge. This actually might be more flat. We're looking at more something like this. The great thing about duct tape, or sorry, about aluminum foil, is that it's pretty flexible. So you can kind of do one in first. Actually, looks like I'm gonna have to pull in a little bit. I'm just gonna try to get this to kind of roughly align with this first. I'm just gonna like pull it up, see what happens. So, surprise, surprise, more duct tape. We're basically looking to create a version of this out of this material that we can then deconstruct and turn into patterns. Making sure that you also get the corners. That's what you're stretching against. This is working out much better than I expected so far. We'll see how long this trend continues. So from here, we then want to start figuring out. So just to show you what I've done so far, I just taped this line that I drew here. I just am taping the aluminum foil along that line. And then my goal is to lift this up to a point where I want it, and then going to do the same thing for the other line, right? And I may not have enough aluminum, I may or may not. Because it did say I'm actually going to wind up sealing this kind of early, so I might just tuck some of this under leaving some additional stuff because I know I'm probably not going to get it right at first. Just kind of get an approximate. And then when I do the other one, I can then kind of finagle either fold to the point where it gets me the seam that I want. So I'm just going to dive in and tuck all this under. Cool. Decent start. I think it's a little short, but let's make the other piece first, and we'll try to bring those together. All right. Just checking my messages. All right. More Reynolds wrap. This one, we're going to kind of go from the opposite edge. Fold the Reynolds wrap in half, which just makes it a little bit sturdier. We're going to probably a little bit extra just in case I need it. So if you don't plan it out well enough, you can always, you know, like I did earlier, attach more Reynolds wrap, but sometimes having like a lot of excess material to begin with is helpful. Again, it looks like this one curves in, so for me to be flat, I'm going to pull in, on camera, I need to pull in more from here, because as I see there's like a curve here. For me to align with it, I want to either, yeah, so if I go flat with it, you see how I lose it if I go too far in, so I need to actually make this more of a, I forget the convex or whatever, the concave. I don't know, I need to make it less. I'll say this once, I'll say it many times. I went to art school, not math school. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just kind of, see, I'm starting to make this kind of more of a curve. Again, like, if at all any of this seems kind of advanced by any means, as advanced as sculpting aluminum foil can be. Again, the goal is just connect. You're just connecting dots. You just and try not to worry so much about the bigger picture. Just, you know, one step at a time, and eventually you just keep repeating this, and eventually have something that may or may not look good. And this is actually, this lines up pretty well, so I'm going to tape this. Trying to keep some of my lines. And I should say this several times. I've not actually done this. What I'm doing right now, this whole like 3D modeling of this, not on like a form or a face. This is my first time. So we'll see. I'm pretty excited. This feels like this is working out pretty well. Okay. I always say get the corners. Corners matter a lot. So from here, we can start seeing how these two might blend together. And we're going to find some gaps, and we'll fill those in. Because this is ultimately, we're going to use that contour line that we drew earlier to kind of guide us to roughly how it should do, but I honestly, it may be easier just to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to pull some of this out because I think it's going to need to be a little bit longer. And this is where we just tweak and nudge until we're happy with it, right? And we got to keep remembering to do this kind of at an angle, not forgetting our reference images, and just sculpt away. This is actually, I missed some. I want this to actually be a little further down. And just a little bit more here. Get my reference in sight. At this point, I need this to be a good 3 dimensions. I'm gonna undo my little thing. I'm gonna put this back on the shoulder because I don't trust this. I don't trust this at all. Okay. Maybe this is going to prove to be more useful than I initially thought. So we're gonna jump back on this form. Pin this in. Move. Please don't hurt myself. Nope. Put it to the shoulder. I'm just feeling like that shoulder divot that I made, just kind of make sure that this is where I originally said it was. So like that. Shoulder shape. Shoulder shape. Keep missing. I probably also could have just taped it down. Ooh, yeah, I'm just gonna do that. This was not working. Oh, that's not gonna fall out. Okay. Where were we? Figuring out, this is like the main event, figuring out this weird lofted 3-dimensional shape and trying to seal that in. So I'm gonna go, just gonna use my eye here. Working in 3 dimensions, it's a good rule of thumb I like to say is like you want to like look at it head on, side on, and then profile is usually kind of your 3 you want to look because it'll often be deceptive with you. And I think that's what's kind of causing me some problems right now is I think this, as I said, this was how the curve was going to go. And then this, I attached this to the bottom this needs to be up. So that's what I'm struggling with right now. So I'm going to probably need, because this is not, because her thing lofts off of her shoulders and I'm pinning it to the problem. So that is a full-on first mistake of the night. But we can still do it. We can salvage this. This is not wrong. It just, we're not pinning it to that curve. It's just still, it's going to be completely in error. It's going to be more, like this. So I'm going to forget about that piece for a while. I'm going to focus on this one because we know that this has a place to be lofted off of, but we also know that this needs to connect here. So I'm going to redo both of these pieces actually. Which is why we work in this material, because we don't lose hours of time and materials redoing this stuff. Okay, so this is probably my mistake for taking it off the form and bringing it down, so I was like not thinking literally. So this is gonna loft up here. It's basically, this piece is only going to connect to this form on the corners, which means I need to build this piece first. I also need to reinforce this one a bit. It's coming undone a little. That's what happened. My little erase lines got pulled off when I ripped it up. Okay, so take 2 on this. We are then going to loft from here. You're going to be connected in 2 points along here, and then we're going to loft up to here. It's actually going to probably be a lot easier. So the trick in this point, I should have gone, I might go, yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give just a ton of extra material, and I'm just going to crinkle my way into a shape. So I'm going to start thin, and I'm going to start from here. Another interesting way to go about this, another tool of the trade that's pretty helpful is wax paper. I'm going to save myself a little bit of time using some wax paper right now. Wax paper is pretty great for tracing, and you know, normally I would cut this apart to get this shape. In this case, I just kind of want to get a quick pattern for my aluminum foil. And kind of very quick and dirty trace the until you get my spoon. So, and I do mean quick and dirty with this. I just wanted to kind of get like a starting point. So then I can mostly what I want. I know I'm going to need more material and begin in the middle, but I need to sort of kind of wrap around this shape. So I'm going to, see, my area is starting to get a little messy. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to give myself this very rough corner shape. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Give me a better starting point so I'm not being so awkward. So in theory, yeah. I can do this, and I kind of added some extra in the middle that I'm going to just crinkle down. Tighten my camera apparently. There we go. So grab a couple pieces of tape. Just like, sometimes you're going to do a lot of these, just quickly testing some out. So I'm going to, I know my corner is here. I'll start with it. Thing to remember. There's more than one way to do everything. So it's always important to just kind of figure out what the right tool for the right situation is. Again, I know a lot of people who would get the 3D model of this and just kind of be done with it. I find this to be a lot more fun. So what I did was I took that that edge that I traced with the wax paper and I just kind of got that connected, and I left kind of the middle with some extra because that's what I'm just going to kind of crinkle down. I'm just going to kind of bring it in there, and using the magic of aluminum foil, I'm going to sort of reduce it down into the shape that I want, while also remembering that this is pulling up against it, so I have to kind of work with that as well. So I'm going to take the middle and tape it down as well, because I know that's going to connect there. Okay, it's already looking a lot better. Now we're just going to start to kind of puff out. Just kind of crinkling it. Hopefully there's enough excess. I go opposite direction. Let's see. Let's see how much this can puff out. And then see if it's the right shape. Here, we should just be able to puff this out and then trim. It's getting kind of the right curve that's going to be more challenging. You can see here. Oops. I want this to pop out. So I'm thinking I might. So it's not retaining its shape right now, but I think I've got the material to do it. So I'm confident enough that this is going to work out that I'm going to start just kind of building up to it. I'm at least going to give a solid duct tape base to this. That's my theory, at least. I'm starting to lose some of my beautiful lines, so hopefully that doesn't affect the end pattern. Actually, now that I think about it, I should basically be very careful as I'm taping to try to tape along those initial lines. It's going to help my pattern in the long run. Knowledge of what that was. I tape along. Drawn line, and go one more step to even. I'm even gonna make sure that I don't lose it. I'm gonna redraw it. Because at the end, this is what we're doing. We're trying to find what these lines are in 3D space, so we can ultimately transform them back into 2D space. And then transform them back into 3D space again. Magic. This side is. Oof. Keeps going before I lose the line. It's actually funny because now I'm thinking about it. I think the feathered shoulder is actually going to be a lot easier because I think it's just going to be a full wrap of just feathers. It's just going to be figuring out, you know how long to make each one. This one's full on 3D. I am super psyched to actually be using my torso form. It was like one of the first things that I thought I was going to need. So, fun, crazy project. If you've got a friend that you cosplay with, it's a good bonding experience. Alright, so just a little bit more. Edge. Draw. This edge. Ends here. Alright. Make sure my line doesn't get lost. It's gonna come up there. This is here. Okay. We continue to build up towards at this point. I feel confident enough to start folding. To start trying to get shape we want. So this should be going roughly, so the highest point should be halfway between these two. That's annoying. Between these two. So my goal is to get to roughly right here. And that's also another good tip. Like, if you're not one of those people who just has like a natural eyeball, like is really good at translating things, you try to draw something and it never turns out right. Like, stop trying to reproduce and just focus on smaller elements. So if I'm looking at this model, I can easily say, hey, this is about halfway. Divide things up. Okay, this is like 3. This is this one piece is divided by 3. This point is halfway between this one. This one's about a third of the way. Just have those sort of like logical moments, and it usually will work out. Not always, but you gotta get yourself out of you gotta start like they talk about this in drawing a lot. Like there's like the symbol system. You get like the idea in your head of what something should look like, not necessarily what it actually looks like. And so little tricks like thinking about things a little differently, or thinking about things literally by what they are, helps out a lot. Because I know I run into that, and they usually say people who sort of learned, like when you're a kid and you are learning about the world around you. It's like when you first start out and you're drawing like stick figures. It's because that's what a person is to you. You translate it as like the symbol of a person, and then later on you start, like the right side of your brain starts to kick in, and then if that develops early, you start really trying to draw things correctly, and then that's what encouraged people to be like, oh, you're so good at drawing. Like, no, you just started developing your right side of your brain a little bit earlier. So I was one of those people that was a late bloomer. So you sort of never really gained those skills past that. So it's just really important to start thinking very mechanically about it. Like when they teach you to draw, like adults to draw, like a lot of things like draw it upside down. So you're not trying to draw an eye, you're drawing like this curve and measuring that. So I think about that a lot, and that's what I mean why I bring it up is because if I were just trying to make the shoulder pad right now, I would probably look terrible, but I'm trying to. Well, it might still look terrible. Yet to be seen. It's just important to constantly look back at the reference image. I was working on my Bob mask, like, I had a lot of work just fixing the mustache because I forgot to look one last time before I was done with the pattern, looking at the reference image, and I just missed something very basic, like, oh, it's halfway between, not 2/3. That small like adjustment would have saved me like 4 hours of work. So we're almost in a really great spot with this. It's interesting because I had so much material that it's kind of bulking up. I might cut some slits in here, but I might not have to, depending on how big I can ultimately get this to puff out. Okay, I think this needs to go. So again, we're saying here to here. This is the halfway point, so we're looking more here. A little bit more down. I'm thinking, should this have been? I feel like this needs to be a higher curve. That's not something I think I'll be able to actually adjust here without maybe cutting. Just try and see what happens. Let me draw a halfway point. Let's continue this. Oh, that's another thing. That's okay. Halfway. The tallest point should be here. My head a little bit to the left. Okay, so some final adjustments. And I gotta decide whether this is high enough. Here. Highest point. don't know if I started to break here. Fix that. I'm going to go ahead and start taping this down, because if it's not perfect, I can always then cut, retape until I get the shape right. But it's good enough for me. That's what we're going for. Good enough. So when you tape it this time, you want to try to not push, because we were trying to retain this shape that we just sculpted. And that's really important. And whenever you cover a line, just quickly redraw it. Okay, so there's our second shape in theory. This flares out. We got height. Now I was thinking this was gonna go up to halfway through my ear. My ear is probably here, so I'm thinking I may ultimately wind up scaling this to get to that height. But this I think is gonna be a little bit more. Well, actually, no, it does. It curves up from here. That actually may be about right. Yeah, because the next shape we're going to do is going to go right up to about here and curve down. So now, so we did it in this order. We were able to get this line. We're going to build off of this line to this point. Exactly what we did here, except from here to here. But now we're just kind of molding perfectly in 3D space. All right. Continuing on. Actually, I'm going to, just for a good measure, pun intended, I'm going to put a little black here. Just because later on when we start cutting this down, this line might get lost. Like, I want to make sure that you know what's edge and what's bleed. So, all right, so wash, rinse, repeat. Let's get some more Reynolds wrap. Let's continue shaping this. So I'm going to do what I did last time just to save some time. I'm going to grab some wax paper. I'm going to be kind of cheap with this. That's not long enough. And this is really unnecessary. I like it sometimes just because I'm kind of eager to move on to the next steps on this. This is an easy way to kind of just save a little bit of time so that you're not just kind of pushing things around. It's a super fast way to kind of translate a curve. I think the wax paper part is basically what this whole process is, but done lightning fast. It's three-dimensional shape to two-dimensional shape, but done kind of without a whole lot of finesse. So, and I'm going to hop into here. Take my tape, because it's going to help me sort of pick which angle is going to be kind of right. Just going to run with this. Again, I could like trace this on, the rule of the game is fail fast, never perfect. And I also, like before, I want to go halfway. Yeah, I did this one. So I want to leave that middle bit to loft, so I'm going to go far side. Okay. I'm going to draw this in. Struggling suddenly for some reason. But get that in there. Sorry. Quickly. Yeah, this was really kind of unnecessary. This curve is not really that curvy. So, but you never know, so you try. Alright. So this should, in theory, let us do the same thing that we did before in here, but we're going to now attach it to this curve. And this probably really needs to be thicker. Yeah. I'm going to undo all that stuff I just did because it was really unnecessary. I'm going to actually give me fold all of this in half, because this is a really weird one, because we're almost going to be perfectly in 3 dimensions, like we're just floating it in air, so I need this to be stiffer. So I'm going to do this in half. We'll come back here to basically start by taping this to this on the sides, like this. And we'll go from there. So back to the tape. This is fun, right? Once this is done, it starts to go really fast when you actually then start translating this into a pattern. So it's worth putting all the time and effort here to kind of like get the general feel, because then it's like you go from this to prototype very quickly. All right. I'm just cutting up some pieces of tape to save myself some time. First piece. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but we'll find out. It's easier to see it. This is kind of down the right shape. So, okay, so I just kind of pin that on. Get my reference nearby. Oh. I think I left a lot of extra on here, so I'm just gonna go. Just gonna start, because this is a different shape, right? This is not a rectangle. It's actually gonna go straight into being kind of more of a triangle. I'm just gonna, before I test the rest, I'm just gonna start to shape it. Why not? It's pretty cool. It needs to go a little bit further down. sometimes also drawing those lines are just helpful for, you draw it in one dimension, and so you have a reference for that when you look at it from the other angle, right? So from here, it's very easy to see what the center is. From here, it's very difficult. So by drawing that line, when I'm looking from here, I can actually sort of see, make sure that I'm not like pulling or pushing too far as I now start to sort of figure out. This is interesting because this is kind of curves down. So I'm actually going to adjust this line and move it forward a bit. Because that curve that I'm adding in right here is going to sort of force it to curve down. Right? So if this is now centered, it's a little bit, that feels more right. Now the tricky thing is, and this is what I think I might have gotten wrong, is that these, well, this one should be shorter than this one, and I think I've gotten the opposite. I'm going to take this, see how bad, whether that's just my eyes playing tricks on me, whether that's something we're going to wind up wanting to adjust. So this 4 inches, this is currently, just 3.5 inches. So it's actually not a huge difference, but I am going to probably want to take out from here. You can also, through the magic of duct tape, we can actually kind of do this without starting over. So I'm going to just kind of cheat this more this way to get this right. So this is the kind of the new curve. And then we're just going to sort of force this to kind of go. The benefit is that even if it's kind of more rounded or whatever, some of this, wherever we ultimately make the cut here in the EVA foam is going to kind of create a natural sort of, well, it's going to a literal seam. So that's why I'm not too worried and why I'm not like starting over to get the shape perfect in advance of that. I'm just now sort of going to use some of this for this other shape, and I'm actually going to do that to make sure I can get that cut. I'm just going to trim just up to that cut that I just made, so I can now forcefully, actually not forcefully, I can actually just, boom, I've now removed some, oh, this is getting thick. I've now removed some of that pattern, so I can add more of that length to this top piece. So back to this top piece again. So now we're coming up to this point. My curve I just drew is now completely irrelevant, but I think now we get to make this a little bit longer. Okay, so see, we're just able to sort of magically, we pulled away from this, pulled this down, pulled back on the stuff that we had tucked in, and now we're like kind of live sculpting or modeling this as we go. So now our new spider line is actually going to start probably more here. And so the way the curve works, it kind of just starts here, and because it's 3 dimensions, it's kind of weird. It kind of starts to curve up and over, so it's just like a curve. Let me get this piece taped down. Just gonna do it here. Be kind of rough with it. So I'm gonna do what I did before, but now I'm gonna be a little more. I'm gonna leave a lot more length here. Because it curves down, but it's not curving below, right? So if you're looking at the reference, there's going to be a right-facing curve here and sort of a left-facing curve, but it still goes up. So, and those sort of curves that can often throw you off. So again, I just look at them one at a time, and I'm like, okay, which direction is this curve going? Which direction is that curve going? And just tweak until you're happy with it. So, because what's weird is that this is supposed to still be in like a 3D thing. We've got things going in multiple directions. We're going to get this from the other side when this starts to curve around. So I left a lot of excess in here. I'm just gonna put this on, because there's almost too much. I'm gonna try to get the same shape from the other side. So I think, whereas here we were pulling off from the top, I think here we're going to wind up pulling off from the bottom, because we need the curve to kind of change shape. It's interesting. Do a quick measure again. And this is like where it helps to be a little bit finicky. So this is 3.5. This is 4. Okay. So this is now longer. This is slightly shorter. But now the struggle is just I'm trying to make sure that I get. You just need to take this piece down. Getting that right contour. And this is the part that's important, because this is the silhouette, right? This is everything. That sort of line that goes around the outside of the cosplay, that's probably one of the most important things to get right. So we're going to spend a little bit of time whittling at this. Because like here, this is up too high. It goes down. We're trying to get more here. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm pulling away at the right point to get that line in all directions. Some of it too is that I have a puff. In some ways, it might be helpful to actually add some of that stuffing into this to keep it. Actually, I might do that. When it starts to flatten, aha! It's actually going to help a lot. Yes. All right. Now that this is properly up, I think we're getting a better accurate curve. I can actually take this down a little bit. Should actually, because it goes up just a little bit out, not too much. Needs to. I think my first line is becoming almost more accurate. I haven't touched any of this back piece yet because I'm just trying to get the front right first. It's such an interesting. Also noticing kind of something. Talking silhouettes here. Looking at this here, it's this, here, here. This comes off, looking at the pattern, there's more of it's like a clean trapezoid. This actually might, yeah, catch here. I need a little bit more of a curve there. That's not what I'm working on right now. I gotta finish this. So this comes here, and this should feel more. Yeah, this needs to come down a lot. Some ways I kind of want to just do like half of it, and then because I feel like that back part's getting in the way. Well, I think my one disappointment is I think I'm almost doing too true to size with this. I did want to scale this up to a little. But as long as I get the right shape, we can fix it in post. Dropped something. Oh, there we go. So much excess here. I'm going to get rid of some of that. I might regret this later, but. I actually think I am going to do this in 2 pieces, just because this curve is so important, and I think the other half is just kind of getting in the way. So I'm going to do one half and then just kind of do the other half first, because I need to start tucking this under this way to get this curve right, I think. Yes. That's exactly what I needed to do. That is beautiful. It's lumpy, it's a little weird, but there's more to come. There's even like I think I showed this in my other video, like some of these things too you can fix while painting it. But this straight this way. I just need to kind of make this seam line flat. Straight. Fill in the back part, and then I think I need to give sort of the flat line on this, and then we'll be done. So not too much more left. I think I'm going to be able to probably use that stuff we just cut off to get this one. This is a lot easier. When we got the shape, we just need to. Could even use the wax paper trick, but didn't go so well last time. that up. And so we got that screen. Click on this other one and cut off a lot of this. Sure, actually, not in my music stuff. Decide what to listen to. The default's always Radwimps. Hey Google, play Radwimps on YouTube on TV. Some fancy like that. I'm kind of obsessing over the Your Name soundtrack. It's just good because it's, you know, it's just good, pretty chill music to have in the background, but it's still not like chill, if you know what I mean. Like, doesn't make you fall asleep. Getting close here. It's actually looking pretty good. So I wish I spoke Japanese so I could actually sing along with this stuff. But lucky for you guys, I don't. Alright, so I forgot one important step. I gotta put duct tape over all of this, kind of lock this shape in. Good enough to remember. The goal here is just to get a rough 3D shape that we can cut apart that has these lines in. So when you're adding the tape and stuff, it's good to do it along those lines and sort of retain those lines and all that sort of stuff. That's really what we're trying to accomplish here. A bit more tape. I don't know why. This is actually not a seam I need to keep, so she should just be taping over it. new one in here. I want to kind of carry through. Clean this up a little bit. That really thick. Home stretch. Losing kind of some of its shape. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have so far. So, like I said, I was drawing these kind of three planes earlier, the 1, 2, 3, and padding here. The only thing we're now missing is the three-dimensional trim here, which should go fast. Check this to see. See, so now that I changed this curve and I'm looking at how this lands, this should feel like it comes further down more, and there should be a curve here that we're missing. I'm gonna do two things real quick. This is like the best part. So thanks for hanging out with me to this point, because this is where we're really kind of just locking in that final shape before we rip it apart. So, and what's great is that this whole process, like the aluminum foil, is still fairly like flexible and holds its shape. So I can kind of start to mold and sort of flex the pieces. Like I want this to kind of be more of a harder edge. And I'm going to be cutting some of this off. So this comes out. That's right. This should probably be a little bit further down. This should come a little bit further down and be cut off earlier. So before I add onto it, I'm going to trace out where I'm going to remove from here. Do this on all angles. It's actually probably, it's kind of supposed to be roughly this along with that. That's much better. And so roughly this length. This is probably roughly the same size, so that's about right. Again, I'm just looking at certain pieces of the reference point and then kind of saying, okay, well, if this is about this width, if this looks the same width as this, is there? So I'm just kind of checking to the proportion. And so what I'm seeing, looking at the model, I'll point at the model real quick. Super tiny. But when I'm looking at the model right here, I'm just sort of comparing this width to that width, and like looks like this without the trim is about the width of this with the trim. So now I'm going to basically just, suss out those proportions. So what that ultimately means is I'm going to cut this out. This is now equal length to this, but I know that equal distance is including the trim. So what I'm doing is I now have that out, I have these two lines are about equal, and now I'm sort of redrawing in that trim. So I was talking earlier about like how this is very iterative and how you mess up and you don't have to perfect it. Because that's the exact point I'm in right now. I didn't perfect this, but just because I built it doesn't mean that that's what I'm working with. Because it's easy to add, remove, and tweak. So you get it kind of rough. Probably way more thick than it should be, but because I know these sort of like borders and stuff, I might not actually even need a pattern for, because it's just like a 1-inch decorative strip. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on figuring this out. But yeah, it does kind of come out at an interesting angle. This sort of like trim and stuff is stuff I usually do. Don't even pattern out. But I want to kind of do everything for you guys right now. Tape. This is some interesting decisions. As I'm doing this, I wasn't like, oh, I'd probably not pattern this out. I'd probably do it all afterwards. But there's some interesting choices you get to make. Like, do I make this, like, where do I actually make the seams? Because they could make this like one single piece and do the trick where you carve into the back of it and just sort of bend it a little bit. But I'm thinking this is a complex enough shape that I'm not going to want to do that. Almost the really fun part. It's actually been pretty fun because I did go into this. I'm like, you know, should I like maybe like do a version of this first and then do it in the stream? Like, this is a fun test to see like, can I go in without certainty and actually potentially make a fool of myself? This is working. I actually have always found like this streaming thing has been fairly interesting because I think it does kind of slow me down and force me to do things right. It sort of fights against that sort of urge to rush. Okay, so then I just need to trim this down. Oh, first. That's good. Sure. That seam. So again, like, I just taped over this, but because it's two pieces, you can actually see the seam, or you can find the seam fairly easily beneath the duct tape. So I went ahead and just taped over it, and now I'm just retracing it for posterity. And again, this would, if this was off a little bit, this would give me an opportunity to also kind of jump in and like I could sort of add, remove if I needed to. And then may or may not be our very last step is trimming off this excess. Because this is all going to actually be connected. Kind of comes to... This wound up from the back. I'm going to draw a line again. There's like a divot there, so I'm going to correct that. Almost there! It's good, like, finish line music. You'll notice that some of the lines that I'm drawing are actually bridging across multiple pieces that I cut. That's totally fine. Because now we're just kind of getting into that sort of finessing point. I'm like, I have like this curve here, but not one here. Do I want to keep it? Do I not? I don't know what her back looks like. Usually it curves top, so I'm going to actually update this. Because again, especially my shoulders are not like a perfect even. The back's a little bit fatter, so you gotta fight the urge to make it perfectly symmetrical. but it is nice when your patterns sort of like line up and look kind of pretty. And now I'm gonna do some more reinforcing and covering of marks that I want to make sure I don't think are real marks. Yeah, where did I take this at? Let's tape off. I'm just cut it off. So let's look at what we built here. So I now have this interesting bottom piece that I may actually keep because like this may be useful. So let's go back to normal crafting mode. Ah, my area is crazy. Hold on, let me clear some of this away as we move away from. The one downside to this is I wish there was more like recycling or like reuse of some of the stuff. That's the one downside to this method, is it's pretty wasteful. So if that's something on your mind, that's something to consider about this. But I mean, I feel like cost-effective wise, it's better to waste this sort of stuff than to like plow through Eva foam that, or especially like more expensive Eva foam that you may be like, you know, treasuring. I know I treasure mine. There's like, for bigger builds, there's like a certain size of like half-inch Eva foam where you have to buy like this $40 roll, and I'm like, I only use it if I have to, because I try to use as much of. I love this stuff because it's super cheap, and it's really dense. I don't even think it's actual Eva foam, but I love using these 8x12 sheets as much as possible. And then I also have, I work a lot with these floor mats. I just came in, which is why I have them. The kind with like the sort of basic rough texture. Both of those are like $10 to $15 for a pack. It's a lot more manageable, but being able to kind of not have to prototype too many or make all those sort of changes and sort of pivots of where I thought it was one thing and it wound up being something else, being able to work through all of that with just tinfoil and duct tape is it's pretty fantastic. So, all right. Debating on taking a break because you probably do kind of want to eat lunch, but I kind of want to finish this. So this is where are we at? Let's see how it looks on me. All right. I think this is the back, so I did my left shoulder. So yeah, I got this is ultimately how it will sit on my shoulder. Again, I'm going to probably scale this up a bit to sort of see how it ultimately will fit. Overall, I think I'm kind of happy with the shape, or I will be happy with the shape when it's like more firm. Or give me something to play around with. Let me go back to my. So let's again inspect this a little bit. You know, let me say measure twice, cut once. So what we have here is we have this kind of constant, roughly 1 inch band around the edge. This I'm going to clean up at the end. The big thing we were trying to capture, and this is what we spent all the time on, was this sort of weird shape. This kind of one that kind of comes up. I'm noticing right now this is supposed to curve more. Maybe this. This is supposed to curve more like this, right? So this kind of comes up. Let's get the right angle here that I'm looking at. But again, even foam can be heat molded. It can be heat formed. So the goal here is to get the general shape that you can work with later. So this kind of goes flat. Again, I'm just looking at the reference, looking at sort of thing. Is this going to be good enough to work with? This probably should be higher. Last minute adjustments. Now that it's like in front of me and not in front of that form. I feel like this probably could have been up a lot more, but I think that's something that I can maybe fix later. Or you can also save this piece. And if you find out that you're unhappy with it later, you can also then just reconstruct the pieces that you're trying to sort of elongate. But I'm going to work with this right now. I think I'm not going to use the base piece. So I'm going to start by just kind of cutting it away. I'm going to kind of leave this ultimately to the point where I hopefully have a bunch of flat pieces. And then I'm going to grab some lunch, and then I'll come back and we'll actually do like a quick, we'll translate all these into a paper prototype that we can sort of master, and then we'll transfer that paper prototype into our EvoFoam, and we will have a hopefully finished product by end of day. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut away this trim. I'm trying to think where I would want to, I don't think it really matters too much where I start. I'm just going to kind of go down here. Actually, I'm going to do something real. This is really important, and I'm going to do this before I go any further. I remind myself, this is the front. I'm going to go FA, front A, FB, FC. I'm going to just put an F here. So it's front A, B, C, and then we're going to go back A, back B, back C. This is really important so that you don't lose. These are going to look very similar once they're cut out. So this will help us keep track of which piece goes where. So glad I remembered to do that. This outside piece again is going to be not too crazy. I'm going to run. This is like right along a seam where I think I had some really thick aluminum, so sometimes it can be a little difficult to cut into. That's okay. Really what we're getting is the aluminum's not important, it's the duct tape that we're basically getting at. It's the base. I'm going to keep the base just in case. It might be useful. So I'm not going to still kind of be careful to not like rip it apart. Base is interesting. Believe it or not, it's not so crazy important to be precise at this point. Like, these are really thick lines. It's not going to be, you know, measured perfect. We're going to clean up more of that later. So that's stuck here. So I'm going to keep this, but again, it's less important because we're going to be lining it. And when you cut it out, you can you'll have like these spare pieces of aluminum foil that are just kind of flying out. If it's not stuck, you can pull it off, or just kind of just press it. So we'll see how this stuff may wind up being something that, depending on, I think this bit and all of it. I may need this piece too. I can't tell whether this. I think this was all the base piece. So like this may wind up being a piece we cut, maybe not. I'll save that for later. This now has removed the bottom, hopefully. Well, some of this is the bottom. It merges into it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the back two pieces. I labeled them C and B I'm debating. I'm gonna assume that I'm gonna be able to do them on one piece and just mold them, but just in case we wind up having to split it, I have it marked. We're gonna find that out here in a second. So I'm gonna cut this one. Yeah, so I got this piece. It lays flat. So I'm not going to need to put the seam in here. And I may still keep this in the pattern because sometimes if I want like a hard edge there, I have to check the side angle view to see if there is one. I might want to know to cut into the back. But there's one pattern. This lets us remove the bottom and the guts. Now I'm going to cut the second piece. This might be stiff. I know we went back and forth on this quite a lot. See this? Remember I said it's important to cut the ones that you're not going to use? I had a moment here. I was like, wait a minute, which one was the one? Was it the one on the left or the right? I remember it was the left, but I should have covered that up. Again, I probably should have thought more because this is like this huge thick line. I'm like, I guess I'm yellowing this. Yeah. Alright. So does this lay flat? This lays pretty flat. So I think this is going to be good too. This has a lot of excess stuff I'm going to probably cut out. Or I probably won't need to. And then does this piece lay flat? This piece also lays flat. So all that work to create these lovely, lovely shapes. And let's see here in a second. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and see real quick. This is the other point is like, so if you notice right now, this is not fitting on my cardstock, which makes me a little sad. So I might wind up making it in two pieces. So I have two options. I can split it, because that fits, that fits. Because I love, I can even use one for both of these. Because I love being able to use this cardstock. If I don't, I can also, you can buy some poster board, which is a little bit bigger. Or craft paper works. I was really hoping I might split this one in two just for, because I do want to paper prototype this because I think I'm going to want to adjust some of these curves. So I'm going to take a break because we've been doing this for a while. When we continue, we're going to sort of create a paper prototype of this. We're going to confirm how all these pieces fit together. That should go fairly quickly. And then we will move into actually doing some, maybe we'll do a quick like EvaFoam tutorial, just showing how I tend to cut and work with EvaFoam. I'll introduce you to my friend the Dead Blades can, and hopefully we'll finish up this piece. So yeah, this is the end. It was a lot of work, but you're gonna see where it pays off. Like I couldn't imagine trying to figure out how to actually create all these like weird complex curves and shapes without actually taking the time to try to sculpt it in 3D first. So thanks for sticking around with me. This will be available as an archive, all that sort of stuff. So I'll probably see you guys in like an hour or so.